All right, good evening, everybody. We've got our downscaled edition here of the Unfiltered Race Fans Only. It's just going to be myself and Chip today because we're the night owls and we're different. Everybody's on different agendas this week. I'm out of town on travel. Chip's on vacation. Blake's sleeping for work. I think Chris is probably sleeping for work. So, with that, we're going to discuss Michigan, some lawsuit stuff, and then what's going to happen to Mexico and some other news. So, with that, we'll start with the race weekend. Uh, I really enjoyed Michigan. I loved Michigan much like I loved Auto Club because of the multi-groove, wide, fast sweeping corners. You can run all the way out to the wall or down low. Uh, Sad that Harvick's not doing it anymore because he was really good there. But the race was good all weekend. I really enjoyed the Cup race. What'd you think, Chip?
I thought it was fantastic. Multi-groove. You could run the bottom. You could really run the middle. I think the car lends itself to racing at Michigan or formerly Auto Club, but it was fantastic. I loved it from the drop of the green flag. And how about a fuel mileage race? I don't remember the
Mhm.
last time. You could say that the super speedways are with the saving, but this was a true, you know, real deal, make it last to the end fuel mileage race. And Danny wound up showing us just how good at saving fuel he was. So
Yeah.
big win for him.
Yeah, Denny, I was happy to see Denny win. I like it when the old guys win, just because we've had so many young guys come in, and that's not a bad thing. But, when Harvick was winning and saying team old guys, when it was him, Truex, Denny, etc., Kyle Busch, I like seeing that because, you know, it's it's not necessarily an awful thing, but with this car specifically and the characteristics it now takes to be good in this car, especially uh, the tendency is to go out and get somebody young and that'll kind of maybe drive over their head a little bit. And I like seeing that the skill set of all those years of experience play a factor in managing the fuel, not wearing your tires out, not doing what Hocevar did, where probably weaving back and forth may have hurt his tires and degraded the life of them. Or William Byron, where, a couple years more of experience, maybe he understands like I can chase this guy who I already know is going to run on a fuel, or I could back it down, which I think Rudy should have backed him down and, raced big picture. He still could have maybe won that race. But yeah, I really enjoyed Sunday's show, especially because, like you said, I think fuel mileage with the stage breaks especially has been largely taken out of the strategy. And I think people forget that that's a part of racing too. Everybody wants a game seven moment all the time, high speed action, bumping, everything. You've taken up, it's not just about who can stretch it the longest because there's so many pieces to it. Just like with the 600, you've got from the time you set up for the weekend, the engine mapping to determine, because the teams can pick what their engine mapping is going to be. Do I want to have a lean or a rich? I want to be fuel heavy or not. That works with the driver's profile. So you may have less horsepower, but you maybe have better long-term speed or, all these different things. So it starts from the moment you show up on the weekend and what you picked. And I miss seeing that play out because of stage breaks. When there's a caution every so many sets, you no longer have to equate into their, uh, you know, how much discipline especially when you pair it with the tires not wearing out. You take those two things away. I think you take a lot of the strategy and the driver skill set away that makes, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, and Larson Larson. So,
They
which,
talked about the fuel tax a lot, and some of
yeah.
those guys, you can change four tires quicker than you can fill the car up. So I think there was one pit stop where Blaney, as soon as they got the tires bolted on, he was first off pit road, but they told him, "Hey, you don't have the fuel that some of the guys behind you have." And so
Mhm.
I think the strategy in that and the track position in that, and you know, like you said, I don't know that if Byron would have just let Hocevar go, maybe he would have made it because I said he pitted on the same lap as Denny.
Mhm. Yep. And
So
Denny
I
stayed longer and got more fuel, and that was the difference from what I can
so
tell.
I it just I love that, it was it made for an anxious race, man. Any minute now, one of these guys is going to run out. We there was a moment where Ty was catching them, and I thought, oh boy, Ty might get his first win here. It
Hmm.
it was a really good finish because of the situation on fuel, and like you said, I think the stages have kind of robbed us a little bit of that. You know when the caution's going to come out. For the first two stages, everybody's probably just going to go ahead and split those in half, and you're going to make it to the end of the stage. The way the caution fell in the last stage, everybody was like, "Well, we got to pit now and hope we make it." And I really enjoyed that, and I seeing Denny win, not necessarily everybody's favorite, but he does show you he still got it. And he joined a pretty big list of drivers with wins was over 42. I
Over
can't what the heck
700 starts, and
over.
yeah, yep. And
So
he's one of very few on that list that have won after his 700 start.
so the only guys that are really ahead of him, I saw Richard Petty's at 22. Don't know that he gets to that point,
Right.
but I do think he moves a lot further up on the list because of I think there's seven on there. 700 starts over 440. Um, I think he gets pretty close to Petty because I don't think he's done winning races. I don't see him retiring
No.
anytime soon.
So one of the things, I mean, there are several things I like about it, but and I'm not a Denny Hamlin fan. I don't have a single Denny Hamlin car. I would like to have one. I want a Denny Hamlin Ghost for my collection. I don't have it. That's one of the ones I'm looking for. But otherwise, I don't have any of his cars. But he's a Virginia boy. I was from Virginia. I what I like is he's unapologetic about his stance, and what's made me a fan of him now is the open and honesty. He's peeled back a curtain that we were never going to get from any other team owner traditionally about what it takes, other than maybe Justin Marks, but I don't think even at that level, on a week-to-week basis to be a racer in the series, that you also own a team and you have all these sponsor obligations and driver obligations and stuff. So I love that. So when I see him succeed with all the pressure he's got on his plate and prove that he can still do it, I think it's fantastic. Now, I want to see him hit his mark at 60 because he's going to catch or pass Harvick. I don't want him to miss at the same time. Do I think he gets to like a Jimmy Johnson in the 80s or Jeff Gordon in the 90s? I don't think he's got enough years left in him for that with his back and things like that and commitments with especially another kid on the way. But he may have to race a lot longer depending on how the lawsuit goes to pay for his teams. So who knows? But I do think it's good to see him, continue to succeed in that regard. To the
Very,
strength
very
of
early,
yeah,
very
go ahead.
early still.
No,
Does this
I
put
think he could get to 60 this year. I know he's kind of writing himself off already, but I really feel like 60 is attainable this year when you look at what's left and where their strength is. If they can carry that strength through this next stretch, not expecting him to win because road course racing is not his thing. But if they can just maintain a positive attitude and come out the other side of it ready when we shift back to the Darlingtons, the Kansas, the Vegas and stuff, we get to Pocono, um, and Daytona,
Bristol again?
etc., and Bristol again. Like I'm very confident that okay, if there's 9 races he can win, he wins 3 of them if they're still in the
Yeah.
right mindset. So I think he can get to 60 and be sitting there on either in the final four or just outside the final four,
I was
depending
going to
on
say,
where we go.
does this put him as a championship favorite now with the third win? I know every year we get there and somebody's saying this is going to be Denny's year. He's finally going to win a championship. The one race for a championship deal kind of throws a wrench into it all. But boy, again, here we are back in the same boat, and it just feels like if it's not this year, when is it? 3 wins, high up in points. If he's not winning races, he's getting top fives. It feels like another championship contending year for Denny.
Heading into the stretch this season is going to be designed to go into, I would say yes. Knowing what's coming next, it's hard for I won't be able to answer that. I don't think I can answer that question for myself at least on where I think they'll be until we come out the other side of Mexico, Chicago, etc. And then I'll have a better idea of okay, how did the team morale hold up, knowing you were going to kind of go in there and lose some points, and this is just where you are, and did you salvage what you could salvage, and where's your team morale still after that? Because they've definitely spread out their wins through the first portion of the season, and that's good. So that right there shows diversity where some of the others that he's competing with, they've watched multiple wins slip away. Larson, Byron, Bell, the other what would be most would and Blaney would consider the big three or four that you expect to be in the final four when we get to the end have all given away races either, as soon as this weekend or within the last five or six that should be sitting on two or three more wins. So I think even though even I'm hesitant to even pencil them in. Like you want to pencil somebody like Byron in, for example, because they're so fast. But I think their inability to adapt when they have such a strong car to what's happening, their kind of fear of changing, of out over adjusting themselves out is what costs them. You know,
Hmm.
you knew it was going to be a fuel mileage race. You knew Hocevar couldn't make it. You still allowed William to chase him anyway when you could have backed him down just a little bit. So you gave that race away. For what? I mean, the bonus point lead that Byron has is ridiculous. It's like 40 stage points higher than everybody else at this point.
Yep.
So they make up 1/5 of his points, is his stage points. It's stupid insane. So you've got a very comfortable lead on first place for the season finale or the regular season championship. You can own, but that's through the stage point structure. You need all the bonus points you can get. So giving
Yep.
up 5 bonus points to start the playoffs with, I don't know that I would have done that. Having that
Yeah.
speed in that car and not just backed him down a little bit, especially with, I don't know how reliable it is, but I really like that prime gas gauge they got in the prime coverage. That fuel burn gauge is awesome because you're like, oh, what's the difference between 5.2 and 5.5. Well, point
It
0.3 over
matters.
10 laps is how many more laps? It's a lot. And that was the difference ultimately in winning and losing this race. So, uh,
Prime for primary. We got to fit
yeah,
that in.
prime for
Prime for
primary.
primary.
Uh, but yeah, so with the strategy stuff, though, what we were saying about the cautions and the tire wear and the fuel, um, the other thing I wanted to bring up was just how it impacts like the mentality of how you start the race. Like when I fire up my old classic sim, for example, the one that Dale Jr. basically made world famous, NASCAR Racing '03, that then Papyrus spun off and created iRacing with. When you first started that, 4 stage breaks, when you would cycle through the menus, it would tell you, okay, you've got how many gallons of fuel based off of the fuel mapping and everything. You're projected to go this many laps. And I know that okay, so I'm doing the math in my head. It's 400 lap race. I'm going to have to pit at least this many times. So I would immediately start letting off the corner early in Dover for the first, half quarter of a run. See how after the first pit cycle, okay, now I can get to the end. Now I can go. And I feel like we've lost that's what part of what we've lost
Yeah.
that because the fuel strategy, which you're saying with we haven't seen one in a long time, you get two different ends of the spectrum. You can get a Hocevar and a Byron trying to go as hard as they can and they're hoping for a caution, or maybe they go harder and they pit more often, but they outpace you on speed versus okay, you try and the classic race with Keselowski coasting through the corners at I think it was Kentucky, that kind of stuff. Like those are unique too, and that's racing too. So definitely enjoyed that. Um, Anything else about the Cup race there you want to talk? Other than that, what a hit for Bowman, man. That was truly scary.
Man, I really anticipated, Tuesdays are always the day NASCAR does reports or post penalties or
Yeah,
whatever, and I really expected to hear, Bowman's out with a concussion. I'm very thankful he's not.
yeah, yeah,
But I was in my head, I was already thinking, well, who can they stick in this car? Who would, who are they going to put in the car to? But you know, sounds like we're recording on Wednesday. Sounds like he's good to go. So plan
Yep.
is to have him in Mexico. So I guess he, didn't have a concussion, didn't have any, back problems or anything like that. But man, what a lick. I mean, that, they were talking about why'd they throw the caution and then why'd they throw the red flag so quick? I think they were just genuinely worried about him. First of all, he was sitting in
Mhm.
the middle of the track.
Yep.
I don't hate the red flag immediately. I really
No.
don't. That to me, I saw a couple of folks complaining about it. Why did it go red? Well, dude hit the wall at 200 miles an hour and
Mhm.
come to a stop. They wanted to make sure he was okay. So I was first of all, I was fine with the immediate red flag. That didn't hurt my feelings at all. But very very thankful that he was able to walk away. I'm sure it rung his bell.
Yeah, with his past concussion history he had, and then the back injury he had, between those two things, I'm just worried about him in general because you can only ring your bell like that so many times. Look at Jeff Gordon, how it shortened his career, how it's the multiple surgeries that Denny Hamlin's had to have.
Hmm.
You know, it cuts years off their, not, I mean, yes, it could be their life, but their racing career life for sure, because of the comfort necessary and the things you got to feel in the car. So I'm glad that they've softened up the front of this car some to be able to take some more of that energy because we know in the first year with this car it would hit and it wouldn't break down and the car would basically just bounce, which means all the kinetic energy would reverberate back through the car into the weakest part of it, which is the body of the driver. So I think if he has that same hit and magnitude in year one or two of the next gen and not year
He's
four,
out.
he's probably out. He may not get out. They may have to
Yeah.
cut him out of the car
Yeah.
because it's that level of. I would like to. They haven't disclosed it yet, and I would just like to see from like the general curiosity, like how many forces of G's did he sustain his body when he
I'm
hit that wall, and how much energy did that absorb into the front end of the car?
I
Um,
wonder if he was wearing
that mouth guard
uh,
thing.
the mouth guard. I
Yeah,
know Blaney wears it and several other
yeah.
wear
I
them.
know Larson wears
I
it.
want
Yeah.
I wonder if he had one. If he was wearing it, I would be very interested to see just how hard that lick actually was. But very very glad to see him get out of the car and who knows he won the Chicago street race. Maybe he goes to Mexico and the team hits it off and he can pick up a win there. So
Yeah.
just glad Bowman the showman is okay.
Yep, same. We saw Blaney spin out all by himself. We saw some other guys do it. You know, I will say that's one thing I like about this car, and they're talking about bringing the horsepower back up, is that it will show this car does still show that it's on a knife's edge and that they're not just stuck to the track. As much as the drivers come out and say it's hard to drive and it's glued to the track, clearly it's not because Blaney came up out of the corner at full speed and around he went like he was on ice.
Mhm.
And so, which I don't remember what happened with his car ultimately to end his day,
I think he'd been a toe link.
but yeah, it's a good thing he got a win because if he didn't, he's got no damn luck. He's got so much
He
speed and no luck whatsoever.
he is the hottest and coldest driver
Yeah.
this year, and I think you could arguably say he is one of the fastest drivers this year. Probably should have won Darlington. Probably should have won Homestead. Probably should have won Phoenix.
Yep.
But wish in one hand and spit in the other, and
Hmm.
it just you got to have a little bit of luck. And I don't know. I think he has the capability of going out and winning week to week, but also just man, you go from hero to zero like that,
Yeah.
and it's just um,
It just makes me want so like this is the first year where we've thought, at least heading into this stretch of road courses where, hey, right now we've only had a handful of winners. It's a very small group. We might actually have a lot of people get in on points. Now,
mhm.
after the next cycle of races, I think that's going to change dramatically because you're going to Mexico, Chicago, Watkins Glen. We got Daytona in there. Like before we get to the playoffs, we've got several what would people would consider wild card type races where not that the usual suspects can't win it because Bell, Byron, Bush, you know, Larson, they're all good road racers. But now you're dipping back in where you're giving Allmendinger, Cindric another chance at some more wins. obviously SVG. Like I'll be su- I won't be surprised because I still think it's harder to win in this car than he made it look the first time out, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, I'm actually expecting Allmendinger to, you know, get one of these based on where Colleague Speed's been and then where AJ's been as a whole in the past. Between the two, and you match those up, I feel like he should. I don't know about Mexico, but I feel pretty good about him winning either at the Glen or at Chicago. But
Yeah, there's too many road courses to say that SVG, AJ don't win a race. I mean,
yeah,
it's very possible
Miguel,
that they don't,
Cedric,
but
yeah,
yeah, and you look at Suarez. Suarez is going to run every race this weekend uh, that the track is offering. Hell, he may even run a lawnmower race before it's all over. I think he's running the Cup race. He's running
yeah,
the Xfinity race. I think he's running the Mexico Series race. So he's going to have a lot of laps leading into the Cup Series race. So I think Suarez will be pretty stout. I would almost say a driver that hasn't won yet this year will pick up a win this weekend
yeah.
in Mexico. I feel pretty confident in that.
I'll be pulling for Suarez this weekend because he's going to his home crowd. And especially if this may end up being his last year in like a top tier cup ride, which I mean,
Mm.
it's not unrealistic to expect with Zilich waiting in the wings, um, who has struggled more than I think everybody expected at the Xfinity level once he got full time. So maybe, maybe they hold off on a year, but if it is going to be, and we don't know how many years the Mexico deal's for, if it's like a 1 year or multiples, but because of the security and all the things it takes to get down there. But if this is a one in, and then who knows when the next one is, I think it'd be awesome to see him win in front of, his native crowd and everything. That just would be like the icing on the cake. I don't want it to happen because of, look like a manufactured thing, but I think it would be a really neat, like Cinderella story. But based on Daniel's track history, if he does, we know it's not going to be a fluke. We know he's a good road racer. We know he's a good
Well,
speedway racer. He's good and he's in good equipment. Like Chastain continues to prove he's right there. Um, and Daniel's had opportunities this year, just had some bad luck. So we'll see what happens there.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be different. A lot of folks maybe not necessarily in love with road course racing, but I do think it's a style of racing that you need to be good at. And you
Mhm.
know, Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Larson have all shown that they can hang with what were the
Mhm.
road course ringers. And so I look at it as it's a challenge that these drivers and teams used to almost write the races off.
Yeah.
They'd go and they'd say, if we can sneak out of there with a top 10, top 15 finish, we'll be happy. Well, now I think you've got to look at it as, man, we need to go in there thinking we can win this race. And yeah, I think maybe the cars leveled the playing field a little bit, but I don't, yeah, I think SVG and AJ will be quick, but I don't expect uh, that Christopher Bell or Kyle Busch or Larson, they ought to be right up there battling for the win too.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see how the elevation impacts the cars and the drivers because as somebody who's climbed several mountains that are in the 10,000 foot elevation range or higher, going to Fuji, going to Maui and stuff like that, Mexico City's high or and so we know that, your cars require a different fuel mixture. So talked about earlier with the fuel mileage and the mapping, hopefully nobody misses it. Did you make your car, did you choke it down or make it burn too much? You might have screwed that up before you got there. So we'll see how that goes too. Because this is one of those high elevation tracks, like if you were going out to like Pikes Peak or, in the Colorado type thing. So I'm looking forward to that. Anything else with Michigan you want to touch on besides before we get into like separately to like the Ram announcement, things like that?
No, I do know two drivers were experimenting. So John Hunter Nemechek went to Aspen with Jimmy Johnson, so he was trying to see what it was going to be like in a little bit thinner air, and then Reddick had some sort of crazy setup to restrict his airflow a little bit. I saw
Is
him
he
post
was his the
something.
one that was like in the clear chamber or whatever?
Yeah,
Okay.
he was doing something to try to ready himself. So it just those were two drivers that I knew were doing some things to try to be ready uh, for the air. There may be more, but those are the only two that I actually read or saw something on to
And
prepare for this weekend.
for anybody who doesn't think that that's a real thing, I'll tell you right now, I'm not an athlete by any means. I played high school sports, stuff like that. But so in my 20s, I climbed Mount Fuji and it's high and I climbed it pretty much no problem. And I'm hiking it and everything. In my 40s, I've climbed Maui twice. And in the hour it took me just to summit Maui, go up and down each time because of the change in elevation and pressure and everything. Like at first you don't notice it, but when you sit down and like especially with what these guys have been going through with the cars, like it knocks you back. It's quite surprising how much that difference really makes, in your day-to-day life. And these guys are in way better shape than I'm ever going to be at this point, or than I was when I was, in the Navy and trying to be a search and rescue swimmer and other kind of stuff like that. So uh, I'm genuinely, because you see week after week, some of them get out and these cars are a handful and it's exhausted them already. And now we're adding another layer of complexity on top of that. So, not this week, but the week before where Denny had no heat or no cool air and he had to have his visor up. And like, you really, from a car mechanic standpoint, this is the one week where none of those systems can afford to fail, or you could it wouldn't, it's not out of the realm of possibility for a driver to pass the hell out going through a turn.
Yep.
Just the oxygen sensory that comes with those changes in elevation, and they're not going to be there too early because of the ingoing and outgoing process through customs and getting all the equipment in there. They're only going to be there for a day or two, so it's not like you're going to have all this climatization time. So uh, this is
I'll
truly,
be
I think, one of our
anxious.
first true tests of man and machine that we've had in a long time, compared to what we used to have.
I'll be anxious to see what they look like when they get out of practice, because I
Same.
think NASCAR's giving them an hour this weekend since it's a new track.
Okay.
So, well, I think they've got, a little bit longer practice session. Once these guys get done, I'll be anxious to see if they're, trying to catch their breath or if they, we didn't notice anything or we'll see after practice how these guys feel and
Yeah, I think you'll be
be
able to tell
anxious
in
to
their
see.
speech mannerisms very quickly how the oxygen difference is impacting them or not. Uh, Obviously, separate from when we get to the end of the race and who's got to sit down when they get out of the car, kind of like they used to when they get out and run in the Indy, the Brickyard in the summertime, and it, be blaringly hot. So, all right. Uh, so moving on then, Ram came out and announced their thing after it was kind of leaked, unfortunately for them. Uh, I think it's great to see finally we have, after NASCAR's been telling everybody we neutered the package and this, that, and the other so we could get more manufacturers in, to get a new manufacturer in that's been here before. I'm glad to see him back. I never wanted to see him leave, but kind of Penske kind of hosed him when they went to Ford in 2013 after they just won him the championship in 2012. So uh, that's the unfortunate part. But you know is what it is. I'm glad to see them back. I'm not surprised they're not bringing the car back yet because developing a cup car is a much taller task with these, we'll call them kit cars for all intents and purposes, and what you got to do there. And then uh, we talked about it in our little private group, but like the Ram has one kind of brand and it says like I'm here and I'm tough and everything. And then Dodge's brand with their cars, they're not really sure what they want to do. They've kind of shifted away from the gas to the EV, and NASCAR is not really committed to that right now. So maybe that's why they're not bringing the car portion back at the same time. Honestly, my 2 cents, I would love for them to just be a truck affiliation and no Cup, no Xfinity at all. Just stay Ram. Don't bring Dodge at all. Let's go get Honda or Nissan or Hyundai or somebody else for the Cup and Xfinity side. And if they want to bring their trucks too, I mean, they've all got trucks. That's fine. But the truck series is the most underfunded series of the three. So if you could get Ram to focus all of their finances and energy into the truck series, I think you'd get a better product in the truck series and kind of bring it back to where it once was. What do you think, Chip?
I'm excited to see it. You want more manufacturers. There's no reason why you would want to see a one manufactured series or just one or two. So Ram coming back is great. Loved their little burnout display, their unveil. I think it was probably the worst kept secret all year, but
Yeah.
anxious to find out who they're going to be working with.
Yeah.
That was the big thing. I don't think the rumors are swirling that Cletus is going to get behind the wheel of it. Heard DBC mention that the ARCA team owner of that car could potentially be a team owner for him in the truck series with Ram.
Okay. I
So
hadn't heard that stuff
let's
yet, so that's interesting. Okay.
spoiler.
No, that's
We'll
okay.
we'll
I haven't
we'll
listened to all those pieces yet, but I'm when I listened to Jordan and them talk, they said that, they've heard some like light rumors, but nothing they were ready to report like hard on yet. So,
that was the biggest one that Freddie let loose. That I can't. Is it Pinnacle or what?
Mhm.
Whoever the team owner of the car that Cletus drove in the ARCA series could be a potential landing spot for Ram. But it was kind of odd that there wasn't one present when they unveiled the truck.
Yeah.
I really thought there would be somebody saying, "Hey, we're leaving Ford, we're leaving Chevy, we're leaving Toyota." There might be some contract obligations. You're in the middle of the season
Yeah.
that you don't want to make public. But
Especially if
excited
you're
that
like a tier one team that receives a lot of your financial backing and
oh yeah,
aero days.
you don't want to tick off Toyota. If you're let's say if you're a Tricon and you've got Corey Heim up there winning every other race, you don't want to make that announcement. And I don't think Tricon will be one of the teams. But as far as the other series go, I look forward to hopefully seeing a, BMW come in, a
Yeah.
Nissan, a Honda. The more the merrier because I do think uh, a third tier team like a Front Row, like a Hayek Motorsports. Spire is pretty tight with Hendrick, but I do think if a new manufacturer came in and said, "Hey, we will solely take care of you," I think Aspire would maybe even go uh, to a new manufacturer. So I hope this opens up the door for more manufacturers to come in, and uh, I'm anxious to see the announcement. I'd love to see who they think they want to align themselves with. But the more the merrier. I'm thrilled to have Ram back in trucks. I'm like you. I hated when they left, and I do think Penske that probably was the nail in their coffin.
It was just very
So
surprising. We just won a championship together. We unveil our next gen, or not our next gen, but our Gen 6 platform with you. And then I don't think it
we're
was
going to Ford.
even 2 months, we're going to Ford. And I was
Yep.
like, what? And then you see Dodge just step away altogether. And I think if that doesn't happen, they would still have been here. Now I don't know if that would have turned out to be them winning the championships they've won with Byron and Blaney, or not, Logano and Blaney.
Logano.
Byron ain't got nothing yet, but don't let Blake hear that. He'll be like, "What the hell?" But so but what you said about not having anybody standing next to him, it's kind of eerie because like they're coming in the way they went out with nobody standing next to them. So I hope they get I mean, I don't think they'd be coming in if nobody wanted to join them, and nobody wants to be the last kid at the prom, asked to dance. So I'm sure there's some lower budget backed teams that, if they got some better alignment from technical side and monetary side, that you could see some of these teams jump forward to compete like we had back in the day when we had, when Cowbush Motorsports was getting going, KHI was getting going, BK Racing was getting going, along with all the established teams. And you had Green SS Greenlight, you got all these different ones. You had a hell of a series in the truck series. And I think this
Yep.
would be really good for the health of the truck series, especially like it just from what I see, it's the most underfunded and it needs that money to if this is, especially if this is where your stars for your cup cars are going to come from, you need healthier trucks so you can see what some of these guys really have to make a true
Yep.
determination. You don't miss a talent that maybe could have shown you something. So I'm looking forward to
One
that. I'll
more.
be interested to see how their aero body map plays out for drafting and like what it does from a side draft standpoint because it's got a, the Ram has a very unique profile to the front compared to like the Chevy's more squared off, and Ford's is kind of like a hybrid. So, and same thing with Toyota, they kind of uh, flirt with round, then square, then round, then square. They can never make up their mind. So that'll be interesting as well.
Looks good. I'm ready for him to make an announcement. I don't anticipate it being anytime soon, but I think we start hitting playoffs and maybe some teams that didn't make the playoffs. Maybe that's when they start making some announcements. And
Yeah.
one more, I heard another news leak say that it could be a factory team. So there's all kinds of things that could
Interesting.
potentially happen. So a lot of rumors, hearsay, but be anxious to see who
Yeah,
signs on
or
the
if it
dotted
could be a
line.
totally new team, like
Yeah.
Maybe Haas becomes a three series team. Like they've got one cup, two Xfinity, maybe one truck or two trucks, to build their feeder stuff. That could be something. Uh, there was one more thing I was going to say about the trucks, but uh, it don't matter, I guess. Yep. I can't remember now. Oh, about who could announce. I agree with you. I think it's going to be a while before we hear anything solid, unless it's just somebody who's lingering in the back and has nothing to lose. Because just like Cup, the technical alliances are so close, you can't afford. We saw it with Chevy and Jimmy Johnson when he announced they were taking, legacy to Toyota, like how fast that faucet sealed shut on them. Um, and you can't really afford to give up those resources. So I think I'm in agreement with you. I think it'll be a while more than likely before we hear any firm, especially if it's a big team or a
Yep.
team that would also, potentially share resources because they're not in Cup. So like, let's say a Cup owner wanted to like aspire. How do you balance that relationship between Ram and Chevrolet, your other partner, and never the two shall mix? Because if Ram's trying to build in the back end through Dodge a Cup program, you got to have that firewall there of the notes you're getting to from a Hendrick or an RCR or whoever you're partnered with in that particular season because it's going to be a year or two before if Dodge enters Cup what that would look like. So that'd be a very interesting and tumultuous relationship.
You know who handles that magnificently? Penske.
Yep,
If you think about it, Penske is, tier one Ford, but in IndyCar, what are they running? Chevy.
yep,
So I don't know how they make that divide work.
yep.
But who's to say that they don't leave their Ford stuff alone and start a Ram truck team? I mean,
I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean,
it's
but that's
possible.
that would be the main concern I think most. And I agree with you. Other than Penske, the only other person I know of that like rings the bell at the top of my mind of like a racer, and he's not in the Cup Series anymore. It would have been Chip Ganassi and that balance he had between his various partners throughout the years between his IndyCar, his sports car racing, and then his Cup racing program. So, because yeah, Penske would have like Porsche and then Dodge, and then he's got all these different ones, and yeah, they're all racing against each other in different series, but there's still technical things to be learned that can be shared in commercial application. Like, oh, how are they
Hmm.
cooling this? How are they doing this brake thing? Like there's things to be learned there. So, but I think that's good. That's great. Now maybe we can get some other, cup team or, tier two and tier three announcements in there of other manufacturers. Because if for the time being, if this is all we're getting, then I want more horsepower. That's
More
not enough to
power.
make me hold the horsepower band down. Like, give me 1,000 horsepower and be quiet.
Yep,
So,
exactly. And they talked about that a little. There's again on some more podcasts. They're really looking at, I think 750 is the magic number, wanting to
yeah.
go up about 75 to so. Denny was one of the ones that said it ain't what we want, but it's more than we got. So come on.
Yep. It, you know what? It will still, as much as people say, oh, it's not going to move the needle. If it makes you spin, if it's increased just a slight chance of spinning the tires or wear the tires just a little bit more, or makes more downforce, which makes you wear the tires out faster or your potential to blow a tire, and you have to change how you drive the car, that's a difference.
Yep.
Whether, burn more fuel, again, that's a difference. So it all adds into strategy now, and then we'll see who figures it out first. So
Yep.
I'll take it. Um, all right, so moving on from that. So now we're building into the in-season bracket and people locking in and getting seated and things like that. I don't know as much about this as I probably should, so I'm gonna yield the floor to you, sir, and you can give me your 2 cents because I haven't
Uh,
been tracking it like I want to, just because I've
so
been bouncing all
I
over.
I felt like they made this way more complicated than they needed to. And
Yes.
again, I'm gonna go back to a couple of podcasts that I was listening to. Everybody thought when they announced it, it was going to be 1 through 32 where you are in points. That made the most sense. First versus 32 to 35, 31, so on and so forth. Well, that's not how they're going to do it. So
Yep.
to be eligible for it, you had to be top 32 in points. But starting this past weekend in Michigan, they were basing it off of your finish. So right now it was funny. They were talking about how Bubba Wallace currently is seated fourth. His reward for being seated fourth would be going up against Ryan Blaney because he had such a terrible race in Michigan. So so it's not points. It's based off of these finishes. So I think from what they were discussing, they're going to take the Michigan race and the next two, and they're going to take your average finish over these three races, and that is what is going to seed you for the five race in season March Madness
Yeah.
style bracket. But it was kind of funny listening to them talk about how they were so excited that they finished fourth, and that was going to give them a good seed. And currently, the guy that they would be up against would be Blaney. You would think that would not be, the
Yeah.
way that it would work out. But I think Blaney will move up. I mean, he's not the best at road courses, but I do think he'll improve his average finish better than whatever it was, 28th or whatever it was. So I think they could have made it easier. I would have just gone points. I would have just said top 32 and just bam, go with it. But
Yep.
they wanted this kind of opportunity for guys to seed themselves. So like your number one seed right now is Denny Hamlin because he won the race.
Yeah.
Will he be after the next two? I don't know, but I love it. I think there's $1 million on the line for
Mhm.
this,
Yep.
so I love it, and it's gonna be, they'll give all the fans the opportunity to fill out a bracket just like you would from March Madness. You'll have upsets, I'm sure, and I can't wait to see where people are seated.
Oh, I
Uh,
don't
you
think
know,
there's going to be a perfect bracket to be had because of what we've got coming. Uh,
no, I mean
just
you think
in the
about.
range of number of like wild card things that we're going to have, and then the way they did the seating going into it, it's going to be hard to have.
So I don't have the schedule right in front of me. Where do we know the five races?
So let me
So we've
go
got
to.
two more to seed it, and then five races. And I think inside the five, you're going to have a super speedway, another road course.
Let's go to the
Um,
in-season challenge because here it
I'll
is.
be
They actually have a page for it now.
okay.
Okay, so it hasn't been filled out yet, but seating races are Michigan, uh, Mexico, Pocono.
You couldn't
Then
find three more
right,
different
right.
racetracks.
You've got probably our fastest track on the schedule, followed by somewhere nobody's ever been before. So that's a true wild card, other than the Xfinity
Yep.
Series, like Cup ain't race there. And then you've got the only triangle track we got. And then we drop into the five races that are we shift to TNT out of Prime. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think they found a way to take what Denny presented them and kind of dick it up to some extent, but we'll see how it plays out. He laid out a very last year easy thing to follow that a lot of people did. And Dale Jr., Dirty Mo Media. hyped it up really well. I'm glad to see NASCAR adopt it, regardless of if they messed it up or made it, more confusing than maybe it had to be. Because I think anything that engages us as a fan gives us something to talk about while we race to the cutoff for the championship, and gives people who are, having a crappy season a chance to kind of redeem something for themselves. So, I'm not for the, hey, let's just let you seed yourselves, but at the same time, if you're having an off year like Brad Keselowski and them, fast cars can't seem to get out of their own damn way.
Yeah.
They still have a chance, even though they're so poorly ranked in the season, to get a chance at this $1 million where they
Yeah.
didn't have at others. And I think that's good. And we've had a lot of cars like that this year. Ty Gibbs, and they dug a hole early. Brad dug a hole early. There's a lot of guys that were at the back early and have had a hard time digging out of there or haven't dug out of there. That this is a chance for them to salvage something from their season. I mean, $1 million is still after taxes $600,000. So that's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff you can do for your team, whether that's just make your quality of life better or whatever. And it's something to talk about. So um, I'm looking forward to that part, because it gives you something to follow along in the race.
Think about the seating. So I guess I'm going to dwell on this. So because Blaney had such a bad race,
Yeah.
SVG finished in the top 20. He's headed to a road course.
Oh my
He's
God.
he's going to be seated way higher than Blaney is. So
Yep.
if you think about it, SVG probably has the potential of being a 11 or 12 seed, where Blaney's going
Yep.
to struggle to be
And if you want to
top
talk
20.
about if you make yourself into the actual in-season challenge, here's your tracks you have to compete at to get to the end. Talk about a rough stretch of tracks. All right. Atlanta,
Ooh,
drafting. Chicago street race, followed by Sonoma road course, followed by
back-to-back road
Dover.
courses.
Yep. So back-to-back road courses, Dover, and then the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the Brickyard
So
400.
ends at Indy.
It ends at Indy. Already one
Mm.
of the hardest races, regardless if you think NASCAR should be there or not, whether you find it an entertaining race or not. It's by far the most demanding race in the entire season on a team from every
Yeah.
component possible. It demands absolute perfect execution to win
And
there.
two drivers are going to be racing for
And
$1 million.
two racers are going to be racing for $1 million at basically the most prestigious racetrack in the world.
Yep.
So that'll be, I mean, it's not all, cynically bad. I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out, and I can't even begin to tell you who I think is going to be the ones racing there at the end because there's so many things on the line. You're going to be seeding yourself. Who can afford to throw away points to try and win something versus, okay,
Do
do
you
we
think
want to
that
go for a win in the
plays?
million? Can you
Do
afford
you
to
think
go
that
for?
plays at all in the back of like a crew chief's mind of like, hey, we've got a chance to win this race, or we've got a chance to beat Brad Keselowski, and if we can beat Brad, we move on. So I
Right.
wonder, are there any, are there going to be any crew chief calls to where they're like, man, we got a shot to, we got a shot at a good day, but if we do this, we, will they? The drivers knew last year, so I
Yeah.
think that's funny. The drivers, even though there was no money on the line, the drivers knew who they were going up against in juniors tournament. They knew who they were racing, and they
Yep.
were, there was some ribbon going
They
on
wanted that
back and
bragging
forth.
rights. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, like, if I get to Indianapolis and it turns into a fuel mileage race plenty of times, depending on how it lays out with this.
Yep.
If I'm racing Hocevar, if I'm in the same situation I was at in Michigan and I got Hocevar, Byron, and Hamlin going, and let's say Hamlin and I don't need to win the race, but if I just beat Byron, I get $1 million. Am I willing to let a Brickyard, a crown jewel, slip away potentially
Just to win $1 million.
and potentially get passed as long as Byron runs out just to get $1 million? How much is that crown jewel trophy worth to
Hmm.
somebody, especially if you're a contender to win that race? Because there's no guarantee we keep going back there in this configuration, just like we did with the road course. We could easily go
Yep.
back. So, and that's a high one on a lot of people's, you know, resumes that they want. So I think it could be very interesting, depending on who your final contenders are there when we get to that race. And then qualifying through those races, that's a tough stretch of races, both the seeding races and the others. So Uh,
Can't wait to fill out my bracket, man. I'll be looking forward to.
well, they've
I
got
can't
a
wait
thing
to
on the
see.
webpage, the in-season bracket, and it's lined up. So, and it says who's going against who. Chase Elliott's going against William Byron, one
So
versus.
that'll change, I guess, week to week until
Yeah,
they finalize
yeah.
the.
Oh, these are the positions, not the car numbers. Okay, that makes more sense. I was like, they've already got this filled out. I'm like, this doesn't look right.
So that yeah, so they got two more
And we
races
don't
to
even
get
have a
themselves.
28 cup.
So they got two more races to get themselves seeded.
Yep.
I can't wait to see the seedings because again, I may be wrong, but it's going to be funny if like SVG seeded higher than Blaney because of
Yeah.
the road course. He goes out, you think about it, he's already ahead of him. If he goes out and wins Mexico, it's going to be hard to outseed him. So
Yep.
that will be. I mean, he could have a terrible Pocono, I guess, but uh,
Yep.
I can't wait to see the seedings. I can't wait to see how these guys are seeded.
Yep.
I
And
think that's
then
going to be
based off of
hilarious.
how they perform, who plays it up, like how much focus there's on it based on what their seasons looked like so far. And then, you know,
Will
they
you
can
have a
put the
Cinderella
emphasis.
story?
Yeah. Because this is another one of those like everybody wants to win the All-Star race because I mean $1 million is still $1 million. Well, this is another $1 million out there
Hmm.
to be had. And there's still, money on the line with this extra point that, these
Yep.
championship points they're adding up with the Xfinity thing. So, I mean, there's lots of different monetary things being injected into the season, which is good. We haven't had that in a long time, you know, like with the Gatorade, halfway lap leader and stuff like that back in the day. So I'm glad to see that. Before we get into the lawsuit, is there anything else we didn't talk about that we wanted to hit?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. So I'm not Bob Pockris and I'm not a legal expert, but essentially what they had talked about came true. The Court of Appeals overturned the injunction and told 2311 and FRM you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't be a chartered team and collect chartered money and sue them at the same time. If you don't agree with the charter agreement, you don't agree with it, you don't get to benefit from it. Makes common sense to I think most anybody. Now they've got some days to respond and appeal, and it'll be heard by a whole panel. If the whole panel says we agree the injunction never should have been issued, you're going to have to take your chances in court. I'm I'm actually for the first time genuinely worried for these teams because there's been a lot of negative things said back and forth, and NASCAR's made it pretty well known that they don't care to do business with people who sue them. So they're happy to let you race as an open team, but they don't want you signing their charter agreement now. So they're not going to give you an opportunity to sign again if you lose the court case come December, unless something happens in mediation. So we'll just leave that out for now. But if they lose the appeal, there was no language about what happens to their charters. So we're looking at right now six charters that you can't, I wouldn't think NASCAR couldn't potentially sell. And I think their PR team would tell them and their legal team, don't you dare do anything with that charters. And honestly, even though they're not racing as chartered teams, you should be putting all that money in a trust. Because if you lose, you're going to have to write them a check. And you don't want to have to write them that check plus damages. So you need to just basically be putting in an escrow. Um, but yeah, this is the first time I'm actually concerned for them because Bob Pockris reported that from his sources, it's 30 to 50% of a team's revenue, that charter income under this new structure. So that's a lot. I don't care how rich you are. That's a lot of money in the tens of millions of dollars per season per car. So you're talking hundreds of millions per these two teams across the three sub teams within the FRM and the 2311. What do you think?
Well, I want to start off with this. So, Michael Jordan is a businessman, and yes, is he got more money than God? Yes. However, he is not going to bleed away money. He's just not. It's not smart. He may enjoy racing, but I don't see him showing up every week going, "Yep, here's a check for several million dollars." He's just not going to do it. So I'm like you. If they lose their charters, and NASCAR says you cannot have one because do believe it's in NASCAR's right not to sell them one.
Hmm.
Um, I, you could see a new team gone because I do not see.
Uh-oh. I lost you, Chip. I'm not sure what happened there.
There you go. Sorry, I don't know what happened.
Get a phone call?
Um, I don't know. Bigger name on the other line.
All
Sorry.
right, man.
Uh, I don't see how these teams win. I really don't. I feel like this is almost the final nail in the coffin. Um, we'll see. I mean, there's the appeals panel and all these other things to come out, but man, it just feels like this was a big win for NASCAR. They are judge, jury, and executioner in this case, and it yeah, I don't think the fight's over. But as far as well, he's got money and he can do what he wants. I just I don't see MJ just writing check after check after check. I think he's a very smart businessman, and I think he'll continue to fight. But once the fight's over, I don't know how long they continue to race. I really don't. So
Yeah.
that's just my 2 cents. As far as Bob Jenkins and front row, I would say they're in the same boat.
Yep.
You know, I don't know. That's one of those things that I just don't know. I hope that they continue to race, whether they're your favorite drivers on the team or if you like Denny or not. You don't want to see a team shut down. It's for the
Yeah.
betterment of the sport for them to be there. I don't know. I mean, you just is there another team that would pop up and buy the charters from NASCAR if they take them from 2311? That's another thing. You don't know that either. Um, this just felt like a big blow.
Yeah.
But it makes sense though. It does make sense for them to say, look, you can't have a charter and sue us saying that everything's not fair. So again, I don't know where this heads, but if it goes in NASCAR's favor, this really, really puts a big dent in 2311 and Front Row's case.
And so what I the part I get hung up on is forget this season.
Hmm.
Let's assume they lose. What happens next year? Because 2311 said, and I'm sure FRM has said the same thing, like we're committed to like don't worry, so they don't lose their employees, their sponsors, yada yada yada. Well, the charter agreement runs for 7 years. When you sign, you're signing for 7 years. As far as I know, and they haven't disclosed otherwise, the only way you can sign onto an existing agreement is to be a new team and purchase a charter for the first time. So if you lost your six charters between those two teams, not that I think they would invest this because I sure as hell wouldn't at
No,
this stage of the game. But if I already owned three and I've already spent, let's just say 100 million per team, Furniture Row and 2311 to own those charters, and I just lost them, am I gonna pony up another 100 million to buy back what I just lost? And now tuck my tail between my legs and deal with it, or am I gonna shut up shop? Because the charter agreement runs for the next 6 years after this year, and this is a 7 year agreement that matches up with the TV deal. So if NASCAR said you can race as an open team, but you can't join the charters now, this year's loss is not the big problem. It's the next 6 years worth of compounded 30 to 50% per car's loss that puts you out of business. So even if they finish this season and they lose, I think they're out of business by the end of year two, both of them, because between the contractual agreements to provide chartered cars for your drivers and guaranteed spots for your sponsors and stuff, your payouts are lower as well. You're going to get lower tiered sponsors, I would imagine, because you're
yeah,
not guaranteed into every event. So you may lose a monster energy because you're not guaranteed to be in the Daytona 500 anymore, the
Yeah,
Brickyard 400, the All-Star race, the whatever. And in return, you're also not getting those payouts. So the person I am actually scared for in the whole thing, who's not actually a super mega millionaire, is Denny Hamlin. He's invested his racing earnings of his lifetime into building this thing. I'm sure he didn't invest it all, but I mean, if he loses, he's going to go from being a very rich, well-paid race car driver in that era where drivers got paid a lot of money to regretting his life choices very shortly and being like, how
yeah,
did I let myself do this where I invested all this money and then walk myself down this path? And basically, I put it all on black and I came up red
yeah.
um, from that standpoint.
Now, did they signed the charter agreement and then started the lawsuit, correct?
No, they
It's been
started the lawsuit, got the injunction to let them sign the charter agreement, but
okay.
also proceed with suing them. Because if they had
Oh,
signed it first and then tried to sue them, you can't do
they
that
wouldn't. Okay.
because you had already waived your right contractually. So they had to sue them first and then get the court to compel NASCAR to let them sign it. So NASCAR abided by the order. They protested it at the time. Well, what happens to the earnings they get if they lose? Are they going to pay us back? I don't think they're going to have the money to pay them back personally.
No,
You know, you think Michael Jordan's going to want to write a check to NASCAR out of their
I don't
pocket? I
see them
don't see
doing it.
that happen. But the other thing, separate from just, the negativity that could happen with these teams, I don't think is NASCAR, as much as NASCAR has dug their heels in, I really don't think NASCAR can afford, you got to look at the larger optics where we are today. The sport that started, you know, way back when we just had our diamond anniversary. We've had all these Drive for Diversity programs, all these initiatives. Do you really want to run? He's not the only black owner, but he's by far the most prestigious black owner in this sport's history, with
Hmm.
also the most name recognizable black driver, who's also won several races, not just one race, multiple races, has a decent following, has a lot of sponsorship. Do you really want to run that guy and those sponsors and that team out of your sport and undo all that goodwill you've gotten over the last so many years? There, to me, NASCAR, even though you might be right and you might win in the courtroom, you're playing a very dangerous game in the public realm. And I think a lot of people undervalue or undersell how important that is, that the presence of Michael Jordan being at the track on Sunday, him being involved in the sport, seeing him how amped up he is to go racing. Because I mean, he can go find he proved it. He did. He had it in not Supercross, but he had it in MotoGP racing. At one point, or not MotoGP, but something close to it with the
Yeah,
motorcycle racing. And he came to NASCAR. Would he go back to another racing series? Maybe he goes and joins Tony over in NHRA, but
who knows?
who knows? But the point is, I don't think that's a death of a. I think that could be like a death of a thousand cuts to NASCAR that would hurt you long term for your fan base growth in ways we don't even understand today what the
Well,
next
not just that.
generations could be.
Who who buys your six charters?
Yeah,
Who, I mean, so if you take those back, you pull those, do they not exist? Because it's part of the agreement that there are so many charters, right?
yeah. So they just go, assuming they lose and they go into, they just, let's say they sit on purgatory and a shelf and escrow for the rest of the year. They lose the lawsuit. 2026 opens up. Now I've got six charters for sale because they lost the lawsuit, plus the original four we said they already had available to sell for a new manufacturer. That's 10. Well,
Yeah.
who still needs cars? Brad Keselowski wants one. He's renting one. So there's one gone.
Well, yeah, that's
Depending
true.
on what NASCAR wants to sell them for and what
Yeah,
the base entry price is. That's the other thing. They were taken at a value of X. What's NASCAR going to sell them for? Uh,
you would think it would have to go down just because
yeah.
of who would buy them. Everybody and their cousin wants Dale Jr. to buy one. Well, he's
Yep.
quite the frugal person. He's not going to just pay top dollar, especially if he knows there are six
Yeah.
available.
Yeah, it's not like you're competing for one. There's
Yeah,
10 technically on the table, four for a new
yeah.
manufacturer and six that you just repossessed.
So it, man, I don't know.
But that, other than Dale Jr. and Brad Keselowski picking up one for RFK, I can't think of anybody else who needs one. You've already tapped out. Three cars is the max. Well, they've already
Right,
got
unless you're grandfathered in.
right, unless your grandfathered in. So, um, you know,
It
college.
would be shocking to see a new team, right? So you would assume that in their eyes, their magic eyes, you get
Mhm.
rid of two teams pop back up and say, "Hey, we want to go cup racing." That is just hard for me to see
Well, we
happening.
know
I guess,
one more I didn't think about, I forgot about, but that they're in a court battle with right now. Legacy's in a court battle with can't remember their name, but uh it's Spire. Yeah, with Spire
yeah, yeah,
about one of them. So maybe this gets Spire out of their legal problems. Like, hey, you don't need our charter
you can have
anymore,
it.
or we sell you ours and we just eat the difference. And yeah, we screwed up the contract and we're just gonna have to go over here and buy another one, whatever.
Yeah,
So, but that still doesn't get you to six gone back in use. So
no,
it shrinks your competitive field. Well, that's not good for the sport. You got to redivvy up the purse. That becomes a nightmare for everybody on the financial end. Um, yeah, I see all kinds of headaches with it. None of them are good for anybody. But, but I agree. Like this is the first time in the whole thing since we've talked about like, oh, what could happen? Like this, I'm looking forward to the discovery, and this could be really interesting to like, you know what? The first time, I think the teams might actually be fucked. Like they
yeah,
might actually
I
be in real trouble. Because we're halfway or more than halfway through the regular season, heading toward the playoffs, and we could get within a couple
can
races
you
in the
imagine?
playoffs, and you're not a chartered team going toward the playoffs, and you
Yeah,
got some of the biggest named owners in the sport and biggest drivers in Reddick
can
and
you?
Bubba and and Monster and all these and biggest sponsors and like and your payout for talk about the ultimate. We were talking last year about the ultimate FU if they had to hand Tyler Reddick the championship trophy. Talk about this year. You win the championship, and instead of like let's say $8 million, you get two because you're now unchartered.
Yeah,
Talk about really screwing up your end of year financial goals.
yeah,
You
and
don't get
it
those
it
points
just
bonus fund monies.
it it seems like, you know, hopefully, you almost are like, man, I hope they come to terms because even or if the teams win, then that would be, I guess, the best scenario. But boy, it just still a lot of muddy waters I feel like to go through before we have a resolution to this. And you just, for all the men and women at both teams that just clock in every day, you go to work and you just, man, you got to kind of cross your fingers and hope that,
Yeah,
boy, that the teams are still there because it's just a massive difference running as a charter team versus running as an open team. And
yeah.
I just don't see either team continuously writing a check to run as an open team. I,
Yeah.
I think if they don't win and they have their charters taken away, you could almost count those two teams as gone. So
And then
time will
if
tell, I
those
guess.
drivers become available, where do they go? Like you've got some good drivers there. They're proven they can win or top 10 points level drivers. Who
Oh
gets thrown
yeah,
out of their ride to make room for Bubba, for Reddick, for the FRM guys I'm not so worried about. Like they're hit and miss. Like they're probably going to go back down to the Xfinity series, truthfully, unless some new teams start, most of those guys,
yeah.
unfortunately for them. But Bubba and Reddick could seriously take some people's jobs.
You legacy. I think, you say, well, maybe they stay within Toyota. You go and you kick John Hunter Nemechek out. Maybe Legacy gets another charter. They run as a three-car team with Jones, Bubba.
Yeah.
Again, every bit of this is hypothetical.
No, but like I
Who
mean,
could?
it's all a possibility. It only takes one domino falling into place. Like nobody
Yeah,
could imagine, and I say that because you're a Tony Stewart fan. I'm a Harvick fan. I rooted for Tony, even though he often outclassed, or him and Gordon would get into it on the road courses and you know all this. But I mean, at the end of the day, 2 years ago we were like, all right, forever, we're going forward to for sale. Like
for
it
sale.
takes very little to go from here to here, a lot less than we think it does. So, it I'm with you. I don't want to see it happen, but I think
I
unless cooler heads prevail at NASCAR at this point, I don't see how. Because even if the teams wanted to be like, you know what, we'll pay our penance. let's sign the charter agreements. Thou shalt never, tempt the Lord again. We won't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We learned our lesson. We'll take all the extra inspections and, everything else you're going to throw at us compared to what we're going to lose in money.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think I didn't. I feel like
Is
NASCAR is the one that's ultimately in full control. Because if you don't let them sign, you potentially lose these teams. Can you afford to lose them?
that was another thing I wondered, if the teams lose, can they could they, could they sign, could they bow out and say, okay, you win, we want to keep our charters? I wonder if NASCAR would say, nope, you lost, we're taking them. It
Yeah,
just a lot of big questions on that, and I guess we'll see in the coming weeks, I guess.
yeah. I'm hoping they win, but I'm thinking it's more like several bad hands of poker at this point, and they're going to have to run the table for the teams, and that's I think going to be very hard to do at
And
this stage based on what we're seeing.
I don't doubt that the other team owners are pulling for him.
Oh yeah, Richard Childress
Rick,
said so much during his interview with Harvick. Yeah, like or Dale
I,
Jr., the one I couldn't.
he,
Yeah, it was Dale Jr. when he
he
was talking about the one that got away. Yeah,
he said he felt like
but
he basically was sign this or you're not racing when he had his charter,
mhm.
whenever he had it placed in front of him. So I don't I don't know how it's going to work out, but at the heart of it, I just hope that the teams are there because you don't want to see you feel like you've worked so hard to get the new teams and to get them to expand, and you don't want to see, I don't want to see the sport shrink.
No, I think if we were at the same point right now and the teams lost the injunction, but there were additional letters beside those 2311 and FRM of like HMS Penske, JGR, or RCR,
Hmm.
I think you got a much better chance of winning because the people you're trying to screw are also the ones that built the sport. Neither one
Yep.
of these teams built the sport. They're both expendable in NASCAR's eyes.
Yeah.
And if if you had more teams signed on, I think your voting power, even if you're wrong, is still stronger. And the fact that only
Oh,
these two
absolutely.
the fact that one of them's a brand new team and the other it's been a team that's been around for a long time, but it's not a rooted history team that was at
No.
the time the sport began and doesn't have a history of being in the headlines, doesn't whether it's right or wrong, doesn't necessarily help drive the discussion forward as much as having a Roger Penske, a Richard Childress, or a Rick Hendrick, or a Joe Gibbs Racing, Super Bowl winning, world-class businessmen, 11, 12, 13, 14 time champions, IMSA, Le Mans winner, IndyCar, like having those things tied to you, along with Michael Jordan, and then I think gives you a much stronger argument in the public eye. But
Yeah.
they do,
If you had it,
yeah, I was gonna say they did say they were trying to. There's supposed to be an upcoming decision on whether or not the other team should be party to this or not, which I didn't know they had the option to like amend it and bring them in if they didn't want to be, maybe against their will. Um,
I'd be anxious to see what the difference would be if a Hendrick was signed on, if a Gibbs was signed on. But I just don't think they were willing to mess with what they had. So I do think the teams are rooting for them, but I just don't know that they would add their name. I don't see them adding their name to it,
yeah.
unfortunately.
And you think about the age of some of the like Denny's young, Bob Jenkins is young, Ray Hendrick is an old man, Roger Penske's an old man, Joe Gibbs is an old man. They don't have time to waste on this crap. They're not into it. Jack Roush, not in like I don't feel like messing with this. And they said as much about it, sign it. Like I got tired. I'm tired of messing with it. So the last thing I'll say is if they do, and I would if I'm Denny Hamlin, because I know what Curtis Polk, not know specifically word for word, but like I'm engaging with him because he's part of my team ownership, and then I'm engaging with my lawyers. I would expect to subpoena Rick Hendrick, Richard Childress, Roger Penske on their communications, on what their thoughts were that were discussed among the team owners about this charter. And I would have them testify under oath about it. Like, just because they didn't join the lawsuit doesn't mean they thought it was right. And here's their
Yep.
own words and testimony against them. And then at that point, the thought of having that dragged out into court, I think as we get closer to court, maybe the other team owners have to sign on to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Like either I can join it or I can be dragged into it, but either way, I'm going to end up party to this, so I might as well suit up for battle.
And they may be, and I would anticipate you almost have to get them subpoenaed to testify to say, were you forced to sign this charter? Did you
Yeah.
feel like you were forced to sign this
Yeah.
charter?
Like under
Do you,
oath, here was your text messages back and forth. Here were your emails.
yeah,
Is this
because they
accurate?
did.
Are you
You,
willing to perjure yourself to protect your stuff?
yeah,
Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's all I got, man.
yeah, that's about it for that.
Okay. I don't think there's anything else. Oh, F1 announced some schedule stuff. I guess they're going to race in Montreal next year, the same time we're going to run the Indy 500 and leading into the Coke 600. Not really sure why. I think we talked about it a little bit a couple episodes ago. I don't know why you give up your own historical. I get that the racing hasn't been that great in Monaco, but you kind of did that to yourself with your car design, letting them get too big. So fix the car. Like, I don't
Yeah,
feel like you should.
and they are.
Yeah. So
So
then it's again a case to me, them moving it is a case of kind of like cutting up Auto Club before you give the car a chance to prove out. Like you finally redesigned. So, and then I don't really understand what the goal is here. If the goal is to determine which open wheel series is the best on basically the Christmas of motorsports, I don't see how this helps anybody. If you go up head to head with Indianapolis, arguably okay, Monaco has history and prestige that motorsports park in Canada does not.
no,
I mean, it's a good track, but it doesn't have the history with F1 on that date. So you're starting from zero. And again, the pinnacle of motorsport is Indy. No questions, ifs, ands, or buts. 400 plus thousand people, regardless of what anybody says, for viewership numbers and everything else. It is the ultimate spectacle in racing.
8 million people watched the Indy 500
Yep,
this year.
around the world.
8 million people.
Yep.
8 million people are not going to watch Formula One at Canada against IndyCar. It's just not going to happen. And
And
when they made the announcement that they were even thinking about doing this, it stinks because breakfast in Monaco, lunch in Indy, dinner at Charlotte. That
yeah.
was just what we were fortunate enough to have. And yeah, the race was a stinker. I mean, it was not very good. But I don't know. You lose that prestigiousness of the Monaco Grand Prix, and going head to head with Indy. Just I wouldn't want NASCAR to go head to head with Indy because I think
No.
NASCAR would get destroyed if
Oh
you
yeah.
started the Coke 600 at the same time as the Indy 500. It would be awful. I will it pull the ratings down? Maybe a little, but I still think you might have a guy, hitting the recall button on his remote, bouncing back and forth. But you're gonna have people watching Indy over Formula
Well,
One. So
unless you find somehow all of a sudden make it to where you can pass each other in a Formula One car, it's not going to be any more compelling there than it is in Monaco or anywhere else. So,
well, I mean, even the Formula One drivers say the race is won on qualifying day. You win the
right.
pole unless you just screw up the start or have botch a pit stop. It's basically you win the pole, you've won the race, and that's why they put so much emphasis in the practices and everything into qualifying. I just I don't understand the move. I get the racing wasn't what you wanted. I was really anxious to see what the new car would have done
Mhm.
on the circuit being a little bit smaller. But yeah, I feel like we had our racing Christmas ripped from us. So um,
Part of me
I
thinks
wish
it's
them.
like the F1 leadership being high on their own supply with the drive to survive, like, you know, whatever. I think you kind of now you think your pants are bigger than they are. Yeah, y'all are a pinnacle in your own right. You're definitely the most expensive motorsport in the world.
Oh,
No
by
question.
far.
Um, you definitely don't put on the most compelling racing. Haven't in a long time.
No. And
Um,
Indy is just, pass after pass and just,
Yep.
maybe this year's wasn't, 2024 was incredible. I mean, you just had
Yep.
lead change after lead change. This year probably wasn't exactly what they wanted, but I just don't know. I don't know what they were thinking. I hate it because for, many, many years, Monaco, Indy, Charlotte, and now it's going to be two at the same time. Well, I guess we'll let the ratings speak for themselves next
Yep.
year.
We'll see next year. But I mean, and again, you're trading in a venue in Monaco that's through a city. You could see the race from everybody can see the race from everywhere because there you can set up on the yachts and you can set up in the apartments and on top of the buildings and everything. Okay, now you're going to a traditional racetrack. Indianapolis, you're going down a corridor of fans to the back to a side set of fans to another set of fans all the way around. Like, I don't understand what you gain from a fan aspect by going to Canada either for your series there. Like, you're going to be in front of way fewer people physically. And now
Yeah.
you're probably going to be in front of way fewer eyes on streaming because you're going up against a very loyal following that has long been like the biggest party on earth on that day. No question.
Any chance they run the Formula One race on the Saturday, or have they already said we are running it on Sunday?
As far as I understand, it's Sunday.
Hmm.
So,
I
I
would, I
mean,
would, I mean, if you did it that weekend, I don't think it would hurt you as bad. If you said, no, we're just going to run it on Saturday. But I don't know. I, I wouldn't want to be, let's, use football. I wouldn't want to be the XFL and run against the Super Bowl. I
I
wouldn't
agree.
want to be, a college game and go up against,
Yeah.
the Super Bowl. And for Indy and really for motorsports, the Indy 500 is the pinnacle. So,
Well, I mean, you've got the college football, yeah, the CFB, and
yeah,
then you've got the NFC and AFC championships and the Super Bowl, and they all happen like this, ding, 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 ding. It'd be like taking the CFB and putting it up against either the AFC or the NFC championship or the Super Bowl the
yeah,
same day on ABC and CBS. That would be suicide for the college football. As much as people love college football, the NFL is going to run you over.
yeah, absolutely. And
And, I just imagine the only way I could see it working, you want to run it the same day, but you would have to not run it at the same time, and you have to be in the same place almost. You would have to run the Formula One race at Indianapolis in the morning, and then run the Indy
yeah,
500 in the afternoon, and then honestly run the Coca-Cola 600, but now the Brickyard 400 at night. Run all like the Indianapolis of motorsports and run all three series in one spot. That's the
yeah,
only way
that
I can
would
see that working.
be epic. But you
Mhm.
know, I think you will get a lot of channel surfing though. I
No,
do
I think
think
you're
you'll
gonna
get
get a lot
people
of
that'll,
you'll get a lot of eyes
you know,
back and forth, but I think it
consistently
takes away.
watching.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so
duration is
too.
where you're going to lose people.
Yeah,
Especially
yeah,
again, if the racing is underwhelming and the guy's got a 10-second lead, 25-second lead, 30-second lead, and you know they're not drafting and catching up and everything, and then you flip back over here and it's like, yeah, I'm going to
yeah,
go here and watch this. It's
absolutely.
just the way it is. So it's yeah, I would love to hear a F1 person come out and like lay out what's the objective strategy you're going for here. I'm glad we're gonna be able to watch it all in a decent time frame. That's good. That's about the only good thing I can think of for it. It's not I gotta wake up
Yeah,
super early, but
yeah. We had it on. I had it on my phone driving to Charlotte, driving to the track. So we watched the Formula One race on the way to the track, watched Indy at the track, and then obviously the 600 while we were there.
yep. So well, we'll see how that goes next year. Be
Wish
interesting
them
for
the best
sure.
of luck.
Yep. So now we're done. So I'll let you go, buddy. Appreciate your night owl participation. And
Anytime, love coming on here, getting to talk about racing,
yep,
man. It
thanks.
doesn't
I
matter, Indy, Formula
appreciate it.
One, we love it.
Same. Absolutely. Unfortunately, I got to go home and pack some cars because we're selling the house and moving. So all that nice setup you got behind you, I got to tear all mine down. So, whew, you
Good
want to unload
luck.
some cars for me? No. Anybody out there wants to come pack 500 die casts? Shoot me a text. I'll send you an address. Come with your white
Co-
gloves because we don't do
Comment
fingerprints.
down below.
Comment down below. I'll send you an address. I'll feed you beer and pizza. You got to bring your like white picture holding gloves and we'll be good. So
Will work for
until
beer.
next time, we'll get this uploaded. Thanks for everybody for listening. Went a little longer than I thought we were going to for the last two topics, but that's, par for the course with us. So have a good week and we'll see what happens this weekend in Mexico. All right, we're out.